This is a special year for the Society and the Rutgers Oral History Archives. The Rutgers Oral History Archives is now celebrating its 30th year of operation. Over the past 3 decades, the Rutgers Oral History Archives has added thousands of oral histories to the historical record. And through its landmark website, these oral histories have helped shape scholars' understanding of the past while informing their books and articles. The stories have provided content for radio, television, and podcast documentaries. Most importantly, the interviews have been used in a variety of ways to help educate the next generation of students here at Rutgers and around the globe. These accomplishments, however, would not be possible without all of you, the members of the Rutgers Living History Society. It is, after all, your stories that comprise the collection. You've also demonstrated time and time again your support for the program through giving and other forms of moral support. So on behalf of the staff of Rutgers Oral History Archives and the leadership of the Living History Society, I thank you very much for making ROHA a success, and I know you understand your legacy has made ROHA's accomplishments possible. I also want to thank the Dean's Office at the School of Arts and Sciences and the SAS History Department for all their support over the past 30 years, and we're very grateful to the Rutgers Foundation for its critical role in fundraising that has kept Rutgers Oral History Archives going strong. Lastly, I want to thank the 2025 Ambrose Award recipient, Daniel James Brown, who will be joining us via pre-taped acceptance, and our guest of honor, Dr. Kurt Peeler, for joining us here on campus this wonderful morning. And by the way, as an extra added bonus, right outside this room, the most recent publications of Daniel Brown and Dr. Peeler are available for sale here today, courtesy of the Rutgers University Barnes & Noble bookstore here in New Brunswick. Now, I'd like to introduce a great friend of the Rutgers Oral History Archives, Dr. John Chambers. Dr. Chambers, will you join us up front here? Dr. Chambers joined the Rutgers History Department in 1982. He taught at Rutgers for 35 years. In 1994, while leading the Rutgers Center for Historical Analysis, Dr. Chambers helped guide Rutgers alumni in the creation of the Rutgers Oral History Archives. From 1994 to 2017, he chaired its academic advisory board, taught oral history, and worked, ceaselessly as academic champion of ROHA. Upon his retirement as Distinguished Professor of History, he was awarded the Stephen E. Ambrose Oral History Award at the 15th annual meeting of the Rutgers Living History Society. Let's give a round of applause and welcome Dr. John Chambers.
Thank you, Bill.
And now John will introduce our award winner today who is present, Dr. Kurt Peeler.
Thank you, Bill. Kurt, you want to come up? I think we all know about Kurt's infectious enthusiasm, and it's one that helped to inspire and keep the ROHA, Rutgers Oral History Archives project going, and in fact, beginning. Now, I'd like to take you back just brief, really, to the summer of 1994, and Kurt was the brand new director and he for the project, and he took himself and 2 recent graduates in history, and they started interviewing right away. They had with them the small audio tape machines, and they would follow the guidelines of the Oral History Association. But Kurt went beyond that and beyond the aim of the class of 42, which was founding the project to obtain interviews of class members about World War II. He decided that he would use life course interviews, not just World War II, but being New Jersey with its ethnically diverse population, that they would go back for the immigrants and the ancestors of the people they were interviewing as the immigrants came to America, acculturated, hard work, found success. These results contributed to a new area that historians were studying, and that is called, they call it social history. The history of the common people, not just kings and queens, presidents, and generals, but history from the bottom up, as some call it. So simultaneously in the 1990s, the internet was made public, also called the World Wide Web at the time. And the web started with browsers such as Gopher, Internet Explorer. How about Netscape Navigator? How many of you heard of any of these? Ah, you did. Okay, great. Okay, I remember them. All right, so tell us about the age of this group. All right. So then when ROHA began putting the transcripts of these exciting oral histories online, a perspective of the average people in wartime, the combat soldier or sailor, marine, airman, and about the immigration and acculturation, it became immensely popular. There wasn't much value, there wasn't much on the internet when it first started except pornography. And here was something of may I say it, value. So people from all over the world were contacting the ROHA. Do you remember that?
Oh, yes.
You're the one who told me that. Okay. Yes. Exciting time, and the ROHA was at the front of it. The History Channel, which was in its infancy too, became interested in us, and they preferred exciting war stories. But they also began with Kurt's lecture to a class on an illustrated lecture, I must say, a class on oral history here at Rutgers, taped that. But raising funds, this of course is always a problem. But Kurt, with this great enthusiasm he has proved a great fundraiser. So with his enthusiasm and with the hard work of development officers like Paul Kuznikov, Paul, stand up, come on. Okay, thank you for raising that. And in fact, what I'm going to say is that he began to get some significant donations, for example, from Stanley Cleon and his brother Bart. Where are you, Bart? Stand up. Give his man a hand. Bart Cleon. Thank you. Okay. And Carl Heyer and others. So now, then 4 years later, Kurt, 4 years after guiding the ROHA, Kurt decided to leave for a real job but he was trained for here at Rutgers, at a Rutgers PhD in history, for a tenure-track position in teaching history. And today, with 8 books to his credit that he's written or edited, he's a full professor at Florida State University, teaching American history and oral history and running a World War II institute. He's recognized as a leading authority on World War II. And in fact, he comes from us today directly from the U.S. Air Force Academy in Colorado, where he's been spending the past academic year as a distinguished visiting professor of history there. So Kurt's legacy, he created a well-respected and well-functioning oral history program, the Rutgers Oral History Archives. Subsequent directors, Sandra Hoyoke first, and then Sean Illingworth, both have followed in Kurt's footsteps. So Kurt, for guiding so successfully through its infancy and remaining a model for subsequent directors, I am so immensely proud to present to you the Rutgers Oral History Legacy Award. Here we have it. Good, thank you. It's all, yeah, whoops. Great, thank you, Bill. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, our new award winner.
So I guess it's always dangerous to give an academic the microphone and no clear guidelines on how long to talk. But I didn't prepare written remarks because when I've done that, I generally talk far too long. My wife is often chiding me for that. I want to say I was really honored to be invited back. I often think about the Oral History Project in many ways. One, I'm in touch with many of the first interns. I'm still in touch, for example, with Linda Lasco, now Sasadeo. She runs political campaigns. But we often reminisce about how valuable the Oral History Project is. Natalie Kazanaki was one of my first, she was there in one of the first efforts to do oral history. Natalie, you should stand up, and there she is. I hadn't seen Natalie in years, and so I was delighted, and we're talking about doing some project at Livingston on the bicentennial, so I'm very excited. You do know this is a Floridian who came and spent a week at Cape May for one of my family vacations. So I want to. History and memory are very funny things, because history is very orderly and there's a clear chronology, but memory is, a lot of memories float in. For example, I regularly have at the academy lunch with 3 intelligence officers who are lieutenant colonels and a 2-year instructor who does British history, and then a pilot or 2. And every now and then stories I'd heard from my oral histories I repeat to them. I remember telling one of the pilots, they said, World War II aviation was really dangerous, because almost every interview I did, someone would talk about a plane crash in training. There was a reason why pilots got flight pay in World War II, because before you even got to the battlefield, there's a good chance you were going to die from training. Both the equipment were making a lot of planes very quickly, but also training is tough, and we're trying to produce pilots very quickly. I want to really, I remember once getting an award, and I felt it was very weird, because you get, I realize why Academy Awards are like they are in terms of speeches. So there's a lot of people I want to thank, and there are a lot of people I won't mention, but I still treasure them dearly in memory for those particularly who are not here. But I really do want to single out Tom Kindray for his vision in creating the Oral History Project. I will never take credit for actually coming up with the idea, but he really had this vision for an oral history project. And I also pay tribute that he wanted this to really be a scholarly project. And I do remember one very skeptical alumnus from the class of 42 who he associated with me, even though I was 5 at the time, with Eugene Genovese. But I remember both Professor and General Bauer of the Air Force. I wish Bill Bauer were alive so I could say, I'm at the Air Force Academy now teaching the next generation of Air Force leaders. But I said I had a lot riding on this oral history project. That it's as he expressed the theme, it'll end up in a file cabinet, and I was pretty determined that wasn't going to happen. What I'll always take credit for is, as John mentioned, doing life course interviews, because I think Rudy Bell, who along with Steve Ambrose and John, really played a key role in convincing Tom Kindray and Ralph Schmidt of the class of 42 that this was a great idea. And Rudy said to me, what are you going to learn from interviewing these World War II vets from Rutgers? And I really thought, what am I going to learn? It's been 50 years since they participated in the war. And that's when I realized I should really do life course interviews. And one of the things I think life course interviews really illustrate well is, one, the cultures of different services. Because there's a real culture at Rutgers, but when these guys went into the Army, Navy, Marine Corps, Army Air Corps, Coast Guard, these services are really fascinating. Having now even finally at age 64 in a military, 65, 64, in a military organization, it's been fascinating, for example, to experience Air Force culture. While I don't wear a uniform, half my colleagues in the history department do. My department head is a colonel, the dean is a general. And there is something I've really I found endearing about Air Force culture. It was there in World War II. The Air Force is, of all the branches, the most informal of the services. And that's still the case even today. And also the seriousness of what the Air Force does. There's a very serious side. The other thing I realized very quickly, when I first took the job, I'll be frank, I thought it was going to be a 2-year job, it was keeping my career going, and that I'm always indebted to the class of 42 and the classes that followed, particularly Carl Heyer of the class of 25 and the class of 49, but all the wartime classes. There's a great fondness. But one of the things that also I think was so dynamic about the oral history, and it still is, the involvement of undergraduate students. It is really one of the fondest memories I have, is working so closely with the students here at Rutgers. It also, particularly for the World War II generation, I was the son, so to speak, of the World War II generation. But they got to talk to their grandchildren metaphorically. And that experience was really, I think, life-changing for all of us. The other thing I would say about oral history is it became very clear to me that oral history is one of many good sources, though it is unique among the sources historians. I was once at the University of Tennessee, I was on the Institutional Review Board, and I would review, we were there to protect human subjects from bad experiments. It's a legacy of what happened under the Nazis. And I would review proposals particularly from the social sciences. Always amused me because I would look at their source base and I'd say, so you're going to do this whole study based on doing surveying of 200 undergraduates. I became much more, I began to think, we don't have any, we can hold our head up high in terms of our research methodologies as a historian. But other disciplines really create their sources. I mean, science, and this is not a bad thing, scientists will create labs, anthropologists will go out into the field and observe, social scientists will survey or do observations, psychologists will do this. Oral history is one of the few times that historians actually help create a historical source. And it is an interesting process because one of the things I tried to do very hard, and which is hard for academics, is I tried to take myself out of the picture. I would always emphasize to my students, you want to emphasize open-ended questions. Do not, I want people to tell, I knew it was a successful interview often if they told me things I really disagreed with, sometimes pretty strongly. I still remember one interview, this one alum, I mean, for him, for him, the really important things about Rutgers was fun, football, and fraternity. And he kind of was not happy with his son being too studious at Rutgers. He thought he had his priorities all wrong. And he also, I think he still didn't recognize that we were a co-educational institution, because my student worker, he referred to her as my secretary. And I did apologize to her to the end, but on the other hand, I wanted them to be so comfortable. You want people to try to tell the truth as much as they can. And while I didn't want to embarrass people, I tried to nudge them a little, but I wanted them to tell their story. I felt that was one of my goals. And I finally want to sort of add how important this has been, both in terms of it has changed my teaching, because one of the things I also learned very early, I think about 3 months into the project, I go, not only is this keeping my career going, but this has been an intellectual gold mine. This has been the gift they have given to me. I think I was doing an interview at the Rutgers Center for Historical Analysis in the basement, and I remember it was Ray Taub, and I just realized this is a gold mine. I can't believe people aren't doing these life course interviews. And this is also before Tom Brokaw's book, The Greatest Generation. And I still remember trying to convince the class of 42, some of the holdouts, this is a really good project. This is really worthwhile. But one of the things that was an epiphany very quickly, and this is something I think professors really need to keep in mind, is to set up high expectations for our students. Because I remember particularly Tom Kindry was one of the first people I interviewed, and I remember him saying, well, basically at age 24, he was a captain of a motor maintenance unit, and he had 200 people under his command. And I thought to myself, I've been doing this interview, I'm 34, I have no one under my command. I'm still struggling to get my first tenure track job. And that the more and more interviews I did, I still remember one of the pilots I interviewed, by 23, he had been trained as a pilot, he had done his missions in Europe, he was now married, and he was teaching in Nebraska as the war was ending. And I thought, this is just, and then he went back to college. He went back on the GI Bill. So I think we could really, I'm also aware, even at the Air Force Academy, you'll have some share of lunkheads. But it's really important to set high expectations students, because they are capable. Undergraduates are capable, because when I saw the legacy of the World War II generation. So when I say it also has given me is my book, A Religious History of the American GI, would not have happened without the Oral History Project. And I also have to say, I think on a personal level, I mean, one of the things I learned from these guys, they're doing the interviews with the men and women, was to be aware of contingency in life. Like, take advantages, have a plan, but be aware to diverge. Because this was never, when I was studying here in the 80s, it was never my idea to do oral history. It was never my idea to run a World War II institute. So that notion of, you know, and so the oral history, and I also, one of the things I got from the oral history interviews of doing when I first saw the class of 42, it's like a Hill and Knowlton executive, it was a distinguished chemist. These were really high-powered individuals. They had remarkable careers. When I started doing the interviews, I realized Rutgers was the poor boy's Princeton. That these guys came from often incredibly modest backgrounds. For example, Tom Kindry told me to live on campus his last year, he was working all night in a butcher shop warehouse. He would then drive to the airfield across the river. He'd fly for the civilian training program. He'd usually take a nap, go to classes, do his homework, and repeat, go to work all night. Or I remember Judge Crane talking about working at a Mack truck factory, and when the CIO came in, instead of working 12-hour shifts, he had 8-hour shifts. So this was very much a poor boy's Princeton. And the other thing is that many particularly, and I'm somewhat aware of this from my stepfather, who remembers the Klan burning crosses outside his home in the 1920s when they were the first Catholic family in this community in New Jersey. It was a very sectarian, you know, culture. There was a lot of still anti-Semitism and anti-Catholic sentiment. And World War II really changed that in American society. And this was very clear in the military. And I still remember, I think it was Samuel Frankel, I have his story in my book, it left such an impression because he talked about, he was, you know, basically the only Jewish soldier in his unit. He's in a naval unit. And his commander makes it a point to make sure he gets to the other side of the island so he can go to Yom Kippur services. And he shows up in this Marine base, and he's in this Quonset hut, and there's a little bit of an upheaval at the base, up in front in the Quonset hut. And he doesn't quite know what's going on. And then all of a sudden, the chaplain says, "Oh, I'm very sorry. I'm really sorry, man." And he takes the podium, which had a cross. He flips it around, and there was the Star of David. And then he said he did a perfect service, high holiday service in perfect Hebrew. He was a Presbyterian minister. And I heard story after story about the religious accommodation that GIs had received in the military. And then fast forward several years ago, and oral history is an incredibly valuable source and can tell you a lot, but you still need the documents. And so I'd also urge this group, not only remember and continue to fund the Oral History Project, but don't forget about special collections and archives and taking care of the needs of documents. So I was starting embarking on this crazy project, which I wisely abandoned, the American response to Nazi Germany. But when I was starting the research on that project, I pulled up in the Roosevelt Library these files called church files. And that really changed my view of Franklin Roosevelt. And you're looking at someone who wanted to name his kids Franklin and Eleanor. The compromise is my son's middle name is Aaron Roosevelt, content in memory of Franklin Roosevelt. But one of the things that I understood now why particularly Jews and Catholics were in love with Franklin Roosevelt, because Franklin Roosevelt really believed in religious pluralism. And I was so struck, first of all, by the Yom Kippur greetings that he would send out to synagogues. You would read these and you could follow the course of the 30s and 40s. And I thought this is so remarkable as you read these and you're aware of what's happening in Germany, at the anti-Semitism, and then deportation, and then the death camps, to read these Yom Kippur greetings. And Franklin Roosevelt, who, for example, was striking to me, he as one of his Jewish aides said, who ended up living with him in the executive mansion in Albany, Judge Rosamond, he said, "You know, I took this job with Roosevelt because it was simply a job. But then one of the things I found endearing about Roosevelt is it didn't matter your background, whether you're Catholic, Jew, or Protestant, whether you came from a wealthy background or a more modest one. Once you were in the inner circle, you were in the inner circle. And in an age where there's a lot of sort of genteel anti-Semitism, Roosevelt, for example, wanted the Rosamans, he envisioned retirement in the late 30s. He wanted the Rosamans to buy a house right next to his. And I think that sort of discovery of Roosevelt, which I think a lot of scholars have not really looked at Roosevelt's vision of religion in America, I think forced me, for example, to reassess the response to the Holocaust. I think while there were failings, it is not because Roosevelt is anti-Semitism the way some scholars depict. There's an excellent book, Roosevelt and the Jews, and it's interesting because they cover a lot of areas, and they show the complexity of Roosevelt's views, but what they miss is where the Rooseveltian vision of religious pluralism and religion is a positive factor in American society. They miss this. They do not talk about the chaplaincy and religious life in the military. Because chaplains, it is no accident in Samuel Frankel, a Presbyterian minister, is leading high holiday services. Because the Rooseveltian vision, the Army in particular, which is the willing servant, which will generally follow the orders of the civilian, really does embrace this notion. One, that chaplains are to serve all faiths, but also they're not to water down faiths. That we're not seeking ecumenicalism, we're seeking religious pluralism. Where Jews can, for example, celebrate Yom Kippur, where only a Catholic priest will say the Mass. And this is one of the things, as I said, I draw heavily on the Rutgers Oral History Project, but also very heavily on traditional sources, particularly the papers of Franklin Roosevelt and the Army chaplaincy. So thank you for all those who've supported ROHA in the past. I really want to honor the memory, particularly of the class of 42 and of Carl Heyer and the many classes. But thank you for those who continue to support this really wonderful program. So thank you again.
Thank you, Kurt, for those wonderful remarks. At this time, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Melissa Feinberg, who is the chair of the Rutgers-New Brunswick Department of History. Dr. Feinberg, if you would come up here. She joined the Rutgers History Department in 2008 and has authored critically important books on Eastern Europe, notably the era of the Cold War, with a focus on human rights, gender equality, and political culture. Dr. Feinberg, thank you very much for joining us here today.
Thank you. So I get the happy job of presenting the Stephen E. Ambrose Oral History Award, which recognizes outstanding contributions to the use and practice of oral history. Previous recipients of the Ambrose Award include Steven Spielberg, Ken Burns, Pulitzer Prize winners like Isabel Wilkerson and Britt Atkinson, and path-breaking historians like Jacqueline Dowd Hall, and several Rutgers faculty members, including distinguished Professor Emeritus John Chambers, who you just saw, and Board of Governors Professor Emerita Deborah Gray-White. So this year, the Stephen E. Ambrose Oral History Award goes to Daniel James Brown. Brown is an acclaimed author of narrative nonfiction. Native of the San Francisco Bay Area, he attended the University of California at Berkeley and UCLA, where he earned degrees in English. Before becoming a full-time writer, he taught writing at San Jose State University and actually my alma mater, Stanford University. He is perhaps best known for his 2013 book, The Boys in the Boat, which tells the story of the University of Washington crew team that stunned the world by winning the gold medal at the 1936 Olympics. His most recent book, Facing the Mountain, examines the experiences of Japanese-American soldiers during World War II. He was not able to come to New Brunswick today, but he did record an acceptance speech and a brief interview with ROHA Director Sean Illingworth, and we're delighted to share that with you now.
Good morning, everyone. This is Sean Illingworth, and I'm coming to you from the Class of 1948 recording booth at the Rutgers Oral History Archives Center. It is my pleasure to now present this year's Stephen Ambrose Oral History Award to renowned writer Daniel James Brown. Dan, you have earned this award due to your extensive use of oral histories and other first-person perspectives in your works. You now join the many other writers, academics, filmmakers, and oral historians who have received this prestigious award for advancing the use of oral history in telling captivating stories from our past. Congratulations. And now I believe you have a few comments to share with our attendees.
Thank you, Sean. And my apologies for not being there in person. I would prefer that travel to the East Coast has just become really difficult. So I appreciate this opportunity to do this virtually. Yeah, I have a few remarks I'd like to make. First, of course, I'd like to thank the committee for bestowing this on. It's particularly meaningful to me because, of course, it has its roots in Stephen Ambrose's work. I've been writing narrative history for almost 25 years now, and my impetus for beginning to do so was really my admiration for a number of books that were published in the late 1990s and early 2000s. Among those were Bart Lindgren's that Sebas did, Eric Larson's Isaac Storm, Nathaniel Phillips in The Heart of the Sea, and of course, Undaunted Courage. So I've long considered myself indebted to Professor Ambrose, as well as those others I've mentioned in particular, both for giving me inspiration to make the attempt at this kind of writing, and for teaching me so much about how to go about doing that. So I would like to say a few words about my use of oral history in particular. I've published 4 books over about 25 years, and all of them have been built primarily on a foundation of oral histories. Either those assembled in an earlier era by someone else, or those that I've been able to collect myself. My first book, Under a Flaming Sky, began with my close perusal of a book entitled Memorials of Minnesota Fires in 1894 by a gentleman named the Reverend William Wilkinson. And that book simply a compendium of first-hand eyewitness accounts of the great Hinkley firestorm of that same year. And it's particularly, although it's very badly organized, the accounts are very vivid because he collected those accounts in the weeks and months right after that fire. So, and then the second book, In Different Stars Above, sprang originally from sort of a lifelong interest in the Donner Party story, but that lifelong interest began many years ago when I read a book titled The History of the Donner Party by a fellow named C.F. Blashen, and that book was published in 1879. And again, it's simply a compendium of accounts of that tragedy provided sometimes reluctantly by the survivors. My third book, Poison the Boat, was built mostly on my own interviews with the principals in that story, but even more with close family members of those principals. And then my fourth book, Facing the Mountain, grew out of and has built dozens of video tape oral histories collected by gentleman Tom Data in Seattle, and Tom has collected these interviews over 25 years and made them all available on his website at bancho.org. And by the way, Tom's a remarkably good interviewer, and if anybody has an interest in learning more about the first-hand experiences of Japanese Americans during the World War II years, you won't have any time to spend looking and exploring the Densho website. Now, my research for these books, of course, also included many kinds of sources, newspaper articles, scientific data, other books, military records, correspondence, and so on. But first-hand accounts are at the heart of each of them, and each of them as hard if they've been constructed in any way. And it's hard that I'd like to take a couple minutes to talk about today. That in this time we're living through, when history, factual history, is under assault, or when books are banned for ideological reasons, when uncomfortable narratives are suppressed, when false historical narratives are promoted for political reasons. Facts and the truth have really never been so important. Now, we all know that oral histories themselves are not always factual. They may be riddled with misremembering, with conflation, with the speaker's own agenda, or biases. And so the honest writer's task is, of course, to hold those first-hand accounts up to the line, to test them against other accounts and other sources of information, and to discern what is and isn't true. The writer must discard what is untrue, but at the same time recognize that just because an account may be in part untrue, that same account may, and often does, contain emotional truths that must not be discarded, that are in fact the most valuable part of those accounts. In my opinion, history has to be more than the simple telling facts. It must capture the human condition, the truths that transcend the facts, and speak directly to the human heart. So, only the eyewitness, I think, who's lived through a true firestorm, for instance, can really know and therefore tell us what it's like to see and hear a tornado of fire rip through one's own hometown. Only someone who's been snowbound and come close to the very verge of starvation can convey to us what that feels like. Only someone who's won an Olympic gold medal can share that level of exaltation with us. And only someone who has watched her grandmother being taken away and incarcerated in a group concentration camp can move us to understand the kingdom. When I was researching the voice in both, my principal source, and by far and away the person I spent the most time with, was Joe Rance's daughter, Judy. Joe Rance is the principal character in that book, principal figure in that book. Judy, his daughter, had spent the last several years of her father's life questioning him, taking notes, and recounting in minute detail the circumstances of his life growing up during the Great Depression, his experiences learning to row at the University of Washington, and the crew's triumphant gold medal win from 1936 Berlin Olympics. So I spent many, many hours with Judy, and she was able to provide me with a cornucopia of facts, anecdotes, and insights into Joe's character, the world he lived in, and his unique experiences. But here's the thing. In almost every session I spent with Judy, there came a point at which she suddenly choked up, and tears came to her eyes, and she had to pause before continuing. And those moments were like gold to me as a writer. Those were the moments when I could feel Joe's humanity, could feel his hopes and fears most acutely. And those were the moments I knew I needed to come back to probe gently, and to understand completely if I were to tell the story well, because that was where the heart of the story lay. The great enduring value of oral histories is that at some point, someone has sat down, looked into someone else's eyes, asked that someone for their story, and captured at least a slice of the human condition. And that, for me, is what writing history is all about. So again, I want to thank you so much for your appreciation of my work, for bestowing this honor in his great gift.
Thank you very much for those moving remarks. Now I'd like to ask you a few questions. What did you do before you became a history writer? How did you make the transition to full-time history writing?
So I was an English major in college, and I got an MA in English literature, and literature was really my passion. I didn't read a lot of history when I was at university. So I wound up teaching college English for 12, 15 years. And then when I got married, and my wife was pregnant, we needed a little more income to be teaching. So I wound up working as a technical editor and writer, first in Silicon Valley and then Microsoft. So I did that for quite a few years. And so I made the transition to becoming a writer of history. In those last couple of years, I was working as a technical editor. I wanted to see if I could write history. My grandfather had lived through this terrible fire in Minnesota in the 1890s, and I knew my mother told me that story, and she had lots of little clippings and documents in this book that I mentioned in the talk. So I just sat down and got immersed in that particular historical event. And really without knowing anything more about how to get published or anything like this, I went to Minnesota, I started researching it, and I just, over the course of 2 years, I just started building the book and not knowing I needed an edition to be published or anything like that to actually get it into the world. And then, but eventually, I found an agent, and she sold that book for a very small amount of money, and that's really how it took off. It was really intended as sort of a hobby, but it took off. That book did reasonably well, got the attention a bigger publisher, and so things just sort of turned on and got rolling at that point, and it became clear that I hadn't really expected that.
A particular approach to your research and writing?
Yeah, I always hesitate to recommend my writing process to anybody because it's very messy and chaotic, and it's not very efficient. That said, I do sort of have some basic sort of process I go through. I always start once I be committed to writing a particular story or book. I generally start by spending quite a bit of time just constructing a timeline of every event from the beginning of the story to the end of the story. And that sometimes takes me a year or more, doing research, finding all the key points in the story, putting them in the timeline. And then at some point I stand back from that and I look at the timeline, I look at the arc of the story, and I start pulling out the most essential points in the story, so I'm not necessarily including, in fact, I'm not including most of what's on the timeline, usually. But I'm pulling out the key events, and the situations I think we really would profit from learning more about, and it will make for a good compelling story. And then, at that point, I just basically, I write scene 1, scene 2, scene 3. I tend to write in chunks, I think, of those scenes. I'm a very visual kind of thinker, and so I literally think of myself as being behind the camera, filming scenes whenever I can. I mean, there's periods, of course, where I'm filming expository material also. But for the most part, I construct my books as a series of visual scenes, which I think works well for readers, and it works for me as a writer.
I like what you said about the pros and cons of using oral history. Have the oral histories ever caused you to question or rethink an event that you thought you knew definitively? Or did they ever lead you down a new, surprising path in your narratives?
Yeah, both. My most recent book is about Japanese American experience during World War II, And I grew up on the West Coast. My father was in the flower business. I've always had many Japanese American friends, and I felt that I pretty much knew the story of what happened to Japanese Americans during that period of history. But when I got on the Venture website and started listening to, watching these oral histories that Takeda has recorded, I realized how much I did not know about that experience, how much only people who lived through it really knew. And so those interviews were enormously eye-opening for me, and the story opened up whole new understanding for me of what had happened. So that was certainly one instance. Then in terms of unexpected surprises, I think another example, when I was writing The Boys in the Boat, Judy Gomez's daughter kept mentioning this guy named George Pocock, who built the boats that boys raced in. I kept wondering why is she talking about the guy who built the boats. I don't care about the guy who built the boats. That's not the story. But then she kept bringing him up, so finally I did sort of a deep dive and I met his son and talked to him. And it turned out he was this enormously important part of the story. So I would never have known that just by reading what was in print already. It was only because Judy kept coming back to the importance of this guy and the effect that he had on the story that I went down. And that's always fun, as a writer of this story. It's wonderful when you dive into a project, and sometimes projects just sort of peter out. There isn't as much story there as you thought there would be there. Particularly with The Boys in the Boat, is a situation where new doors kept opening as I got to know Judy and talked to some of the other young men who played in their families. So it was a very rewarding experience in terms of doors opening up that I didn't expect to have.
Your works often deal with the American West, either as a space itself or the people who hail from there. Are there themes that you see running through your works pertaining to the story of the West?
Yeah, well, I'm sort of very much a product of the West. I've spent my whole life on the West Coast. I love Western landscapes. In fact, as a writer, I tend to write too much about landscape, and my editors usually have to pare me back on that. So I like to write about sagebrush, very Western things. But more broadly, yeah, I mean, I'm drawn to the idea of the West as a land of opportunity, the idea of the pioneering spirit, the idea of individuals confronting obstacles, particularly in outdoor settings, physical objects. So all those things are interesting to me. And also, though, interesting, like, at the same time, questioning some of those. So, you talk about manifest destiny, which we see in Rutgers, of course, and undaunted courage and the other places. I like to both appreciate that impulse, but also like critique it and explore the downsides of that zeal for conquering the West, what the cost was to humans and to land. And so, I would say that all those kind of traditional Western themes interest me a lot.
So reading that led in part to your writing career. What are you reading these days, and what do you see yourself writing about in the future?
So I continue to sort of read the same kind of thing that I write. I mean, I read recreation, but also I'm reading the Barry McMurtry's Vincent Dove series, which I had not read earlier, and enjoying that. But mostly what I read is narrative nonfiction, narrative history. So just recently read David Graham's Killers of the Flower Moon, and also another book he wrote, The Wager, which is terrific. I like to read Lincoln Sides, and he recently wrote a book called The Wide Wide Sea about Cook's voyages. And then a book I particularly like by another Seattle writer, Timothy Egan, wrote a book called Fever in Heartland, about the rise of the KKK, and I think that's just an astonishing idea. So, except for sort of random reading and fiction, most of what I read is the kind of thing that I started to write. In terms of what I might write in the future, I'm really not sure. I'm having a lot of trouble with my vision, and I'm not sure I can undertake another big research project. So if something comes along that really grabs me, I might not be able to resist, but I don't have any plans right now to dive into another project.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you, to present you with the award, and you know, our society is deeply grateful to you and your work. So, thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, man. I'm really sorry.
Before I introduce our Director Sean Illingworth and Associate Director Jungwon Park, I want to remind everyone that Dr. Peeler's book and Daniel James Brown book are for sale outside. They will accept cash or Apple Pay. Unfortunately, there is an IT problem with other credit cards, but if you need money, there's always an ATM right here at the Rutgers Student Center, so don't forget. Now, I have the great pleasure, though, of introducing ROHA Director Sean Illingworth and Assistant Director Jungwon Park, and they're going to update you on ROHA's activities during the past year and what we're going to do going forward. Sean and Jungwon.
Good morning, everyone. As Bill mentioned earlier, we are celebrating the 30th anniversary of the Rutgers Oral History Archive. The ROHA team and volunteers are thrilled to mark 3 decades of conducting and sharing interviews with the world. And we also want to thank the History Department for all their support over the years, and our Academic Advisory Board, which for many years was chaired by John Chambers, who you saw earlier, now is chaired by Belinda Davis, who's here with us, and is a great resource for us, dozens of scholars who help us out and help us navigate the various questions we come up with in oral history. So ROHA continues to evolve. Last fall, we welcomed Jungwon Park as our new Associate Director. Yeah. Jungwon holds a Master of Arts in History from Rutgers University, New Brunswick, and a Bachelor of Arts in History from Stanford University. As a historian, digital humanities specialist, and educator, Jungwon is dedicated to engaging diverse voices to tell a more comprehensive story of Rutgers and New Jersey. She aims to explore how personal, local, and state histories connect to national and global narratives.
I'm proud to announce that ROHA has conducted over 2,270 oral history interviews to date. Our online collection attracts over 30,000 visitors annually, and the list of published works citing ROHA's interviews continue to grow. Our student staff has excelled this year. Scholarship recipients and public history interns who participate in a semester-long immersion program have made significant contributions by conducting interviews, processing transcripts, and producing podcasts. Jack, Sachin, and Keith, please stand and be recognized.
All right. Now, for your information, enclosed in the information packets in front of you is a year in review calendar for 2024-25. This will give you both information on what we're going to be doing in the future, but also what we did over the past year. We're delighted to have members of the Indian American Club here today. We have partnered with them again to interview new members, some of whom we will honor shortly. We've also participated in their celebrations at the Rossmore community in Monroe Township and presented at their Black History Month program featuring Rutgers history professor Nicole Burrows.
We continue to collaborate with Dr. Kendra Boyd and Dr. Jesse Baker at Rutgers University Camden, both here with us today, on the Black Nurses at Rutgers University, part of the Scarlet and Black Research Center, and the Black Camden Oral History Project.
Additionally, we have expanded our New Jersey Supreme Court Justice Project I can't tell the difference between the word participant and partnership, so bear with me. Partnership with the New Jersey Administrative Office of the Courts and the New Jersey Supreme Court Historical Advisory Board. Some interviews are now available at the New Jersey Supreme Court's virtual museum.
Please find in your folder ROHA's social media directory. We encourage everyone to follow ROHA on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, among others. Our posts and publicity are disseminated university-wide by Rutgers Today and SAS News Digest. By connecting with us, you help promote ROHA's oral history collection to a broader audience.
We also have a new ROHA e-newsletter created and edited by Jong-un. The digital newsletter highlights our collections, upcoming events, and available resources. If you haven't already, please share your email address with us and subscribe to the newsletter. Details on how to do so are in the packet in front of you.
We're grateful to the New Jersey Historical Commission for their continued support. This year, we received both a General Operating Support Grant and a Project Grant, which helped us focus on gathering and sharing the stories of laborers across the state. We are also a proud partner of Revolution NJ, the Historical Commission's initiative to commemorate the American Revolution during its 250th anniversary.
ROHA has also formed a new partnership with the Assamese Digital Living Museum. We are training their volunteers in conducting and preserving interviews at ROHA. Jong-un has served as a board member at the Digital Museum since its inception. She has also represented ROHA at various events, including an oral history workshop at the Princeton Public Library, a meeting of the West Windsor Historical Society, and the Digital Humanities Showcase at Alexander Library. Jong-un also participated in a Global Asia's Initiative event on the Japanese American experience of the 20th century. She represents ROHA at both the Digital Humanities Initiative and the Global Asia's Initiative, key programs of the School of Arts and Sciences Dean of Humanities. Jong-un has also initiated collaborations with the Language Center and a Cultural Studies departments to engage New Jersey's multilingual communities. She led a team of volunteers at the 2025 annual Translate-a-thon to translate promotional materials for ROHA into 5 languages. Leveraging her language skills, Jong-un has launched a program to interview Korean Americans in New Jersey. She has led the translation of ROHA materials into Korean with the help of undergraduate translation and interpretation interns. You've been very busy this year. Yeah. Okay.
So have you. The ROHA staff has conducted numerous lectures and presentations across the state this year. We presented to Rutgers alumni at the Rutgers Reunion, spoke to the Middlesex County Library Association, offered a lecture on the 80th anniversary of the Battle of the Bulge at the Homedale Public Library, and held a student oral history workshop at Blair Academy for Black History Month, helping students interview the academy's first generation of African American students. That's all Director Illingworth.
Well, it's both of us.
We also had the pleasure of giving guest lectures to Dr. Christine Scorsone's Introduction to Oral History course. We're happy that they could be here today. And from the Narrative Honors Colloquium. Please take a look at the enclosed events calendar for what's coming up in the next academic year and review the call to action. Help us fill up the calendar like we had this year, so by putting us in contact with your community organizations.
So to echo what Bill said earlier, none of this would be possible without the help of the volunteers on the Rutgers Living History Society Community Liaison Committee. If you're on the committee, could you please rise and be recognized? Our donors, and you, all of you here, the members of the society who shared your stories with us. Thank you for all of your help, and we look forward to bringing you even more good news next year. Thank you.
We come now to what has become a tradition, honoring those Rutgers Living History Society members who have passed away. If you would please look in your red packet, you'll notice there is a document that has brief biographies of all the people we're honoring in memoriam. At this point, I'd like to ask for a moment of silence to honor those who are no longer with us. Thank you. Students and staff members of the Rutgers Oral History Archives have spent many hours over the last few months preparing a memorial video, which features images of our departed members accompanied by readings from their interviews. This full-length video will be posted shortly on the ROHA YouTube channel. Before the video begins, a few brief words about a great supporter, however, of ROHA. Member of RLHS and a wonderful human being, Barbara Cleon, who passed away in September 2024. Barbara served as secretary of the Rutgers Living History Society from 2007 to 2013, preparing and distributing all meeting minutes of the Operations Committee. She also served on the Ambrose Award Selection Committee, and for her dedication and fine work, she was inducted into the Rutgers Living History Society. Her infectious spirit and enthusiasm for ROHA will long be remembered. And now, our memorial video.
Pearl Harbor. I happened to be home at that time with my father and mother. They were driving me back to the school that night, and we heard when Pearl Harbor was gone. The first reaction was, what is Pearl Harbor? I remember the day after Pearl Harbor. We were having lunch at the fraternity. Ron Jarvis was president. We all stood up, and he said, you can always remember that. After today, we probably will not ever be together again like this. We sang Old Lang Syne, and then we held each other's hands, right around the table. It was very, very solemn. Sure enough, the way it turned out, we had several men killed from our fraternity.
As I remember, I reported in. When I left my home that day, my mother was terribly upset. She was on her knees. Now her second son was going in. It was hard, but I didn't look back. I couldn't look back. They swore me in with a number of other men. I remember one of the drill sergeants came over to me. He asked, after I was given this oath of allegiance to the Constitution, what service I'd like to be drafted into. I told him, I'd like to go in the Navy. But he says, buddy, you're in the Army now.
People in my field were really sought after at that time because there were very few of us who were professional librarians who also trained as film librarians. One of the divisions of the Office of War Information was their Overseas Motion Picture Division. It was not stationed overseas, but they handled the overseas distribution and production of films for overseas. They were looking for someone to establish their film library. They were very anxious to have me, and it took a long time because the agency wasn't even totally established yet. Then, of course, I had to be cleared and everything. Not that the work was that confidential, but during the war, I guess, anybody who worked for the government had to have a good, clean record.
The lieutenant, the executive officer, comes over and says, Boumont, get the radio, we're going for a walk. We walked way ahead of where our company was. We were obviously somewhere behind the German lines. He wanted to get an elevation where he could see across the canal because there were 88s that were shooting at us with anti-personnel shells. Finally, we found the farmhouse and we crawled up to the attic. He told me, okay, start transmitting information where these guys are, and I couldn't transmit. So I had to take my short antenna off and put on my 6-foot antenna and stick it out the window. I started to transmit when, obviously, some guy over there spotted us and they started shooting 88s at us. The damn thing hit the house and we threw ourselves down the stairs and ran out of that damn house. Within a couple of minutes, that damn house was not standing, but it was a crazy episode, thank God, really. I took the radio off, I threw it down the stairs. He went down head first. I think I went down feet first. Vroom.
I can tell you exactly the first time the classic movie bullet pinged off the stone windowsill from which I was shooting. It was during the Battle of the Bulge. We were the outpost when we were told, hold that farm hilltop, period, hold it. So every morning, the Germans would attack just before dawn. It was snowing. You could hear them coming for miles, and you could see them against the snow. Poor guys would get up to the crest, where we could really see them, and they all died out there, the ones who didn't run away. We had 3 tanks with us, and they'd open up with their machine guns and unlimited amounts of ammunition. You know, it's machine gun fire anywhere. These guys would still come on. I shot one guy there at about 75 yards. That's how close he got, and he had a burp gun. We lived right opposite Camp Kilmer. The guardhouse was nearby, and I remember going up Sutton Lane to the USO building. I remember seeing some of the soldiers, some prisoners of war that would escape and go to our fields and be captured by MPs. We were all concerned when that was happened. Luckily, there was no fire and gunshots or anything like that. Everything was okay.
I crossed the equator 26 times, and it looks like I had about over 1,000 hours in the PU-2Ys. You'd go out on patrol, depending upon where you were and what your duties were that day. The longest I flew was almost 15 hours in the air, from takeoff to landing. We would patrol from areas towards Jamaica, out towards the eastern edge of the Caribbean, down and around, looking for German submarines. Now, when you're looking for submarines, you are flying at a very low altitude, maybe 800 feet, because what you're looking for is the weight of a periscope. In the daytime, you would never see a submarine on the surface. You'd only see them on the surface at night, because at night, they were running their engines, charging their batteries, and in the daytime, they were running on batteries. Angar Island, September 15th. It's always been in my mind. September 15th, we landed at Angar Island. We've been told and brainwashed through the movies, the media, that the Japs don't know what the hell they're doing. They wore thick glasses. All they knew how to do is make cheap toys out of old tin cans, inept. They were little, they were bow-legged, because we saw the Fu Manchu movies. We were attacked by Imperial Marines, who made our Marines look like midgets. I'm not kidding. They got up right up to the ship there, where the ramp comes down and the tank comes out. They were all killed, but it was a battle. They were brave.
They get reports on the radio in the farmhouses of what was happening, that the battle with the Bulge was over, and the Americans moved quite rapidly through Germany towards the Russians. They knew that the end was inevitable, they just didn't know when it would be over for them. To give you an indication of the attitude, when the two of us were going down this road toward the Americans, we came to a fork in the road. There was a farmhouse in the middle of the road, and on the porch was a German soldier necking away with a Fräulein. We stood there for a couple of minutes. Should we ask him which way? Finally, we hollered to him, "Which way, Americano?" He didn't even stop what he was doing. He just pointed to the right, so it was the right road. I started as a second lieutenant, and I was promoted to first lieutenant there in Korea. To induce me to stay on, they offered me a captaincy, but I said, I'm out of here. Then they sent me on that 31-day slow boat to China. Edmund D. Patrick was the name of the ship. I'll never forget that name. I was seasick. I can't stand that type of motion. I can remember one of the fellows that I came with took a picture of me coming down to the gangplank. He says, I couldn't tell the difference between you and the gangplank. You were so thin, and I've never been that thin since.
The French were in trouble. They were being beaten by the Vietnamese. We were sent there to try to help and support them. We would do bombing missions, strafing, and napalm in support of the French troops. That is why we were there. You soon got to know that the French did not fight like the Americans did in Korea. You didn't have much of a desire to take the chance of being shot down when the French were, in our opinion, doing their share. They were collapsing. We were confined basically to the base there.
It was in Astoria, Queens. I think it was a public pool. The fact that we held these meets in places that were probably public pools was crazy. The '64 Olympics trials and a lot of sports were in New York to coincide with the New York's World's Fair in '64. Because it was within driving distance, a lot of my teammates went. In 1964, there were still limited events for women in the Olympics. My only shot at making the team was to try to make it in the 100-meter butterfly. I was fourth, which meant I knew I made the team when I got fourth, but I was relay alternate, which meant that in Tokyo, I would swim in the morning in the qualifying heats of the 400 medley relay. It was exciting. I mean, I made it. We didn't get to go home. We were taken right from there to staging in New York. Then we went to LA and stayed there for a month to train, then we flew to Tokyo. My roommate was Don Harris, an African-American guy who got involved in civil rights and actually got arrested once too, down south. He was in jail. I remember that we got a notice out and we passed it out to all the people who came to the Princeton Rutgers game. I guess it was 61, and basically making people aware of what had happened and that he should be supported and to do anything he could to make sure that he got out of jail. In terms of discussions of what was going on and what was faced, the fact that these are exceptionally brave people to march around south, knowing what was going to face them, could be anything from death, terrible beatings. Some would be oblivious to it, I think. Once again, there was like an awakening up for all of America, thinking that things were fine in the north and the problems down south. Well, that's not the case, obviously.
I was a participant in a sharing meeting, which founded Young Americans for Freedom. I was up at Bill Buckley's estate in Sharon, Connecticut, and met a lot of important people there. That was really the beginning impetus for the Goldwater campaign. At that time, Goldwater for vice president. I was very active in that. It's a college group, college and young people's group, and I was active. I became a national director of that, one of the national board members, board of directors. I met a lot of very interesting people, not the least of which was Goldwater, of course, himself.
In our society, guys are always looking for ways to prove themselves to be a man. So there was always a curiosity, well, can I survive all this? We were getting a lot of guys coming to our unit who were from Vietnam. They had a couple years to serve. It was sort of like listening to somebody tell me a story about something that happened in medieval times. I didn't think that I could relate to that, but these guys had some pretty good insights about how to take a building and how to use a grenade launcher because they had used it before. In a strange way, it was exciting. I was going to this place that everybody is looking at. I was frightened because I didn't know what to expect and I didn't want to get hurt or killed. It's a whole combination of that. I was very fortunate because I ended up as chief of what they call the R&R branch, Rest and Recreation. I was assigned to Military Assistance Command, Vietnam, in Saigon. It's a combined command, but primarily Army. Anyway, it was something else because we provided rest and recreation for 550,000 troops in country. That meant a trip outside country from any place from 4 to 7 days, something like that. There were 10 different sites. Only one site was in the United States. That was in Honolulu, and that was maintained for married people so that wives could fly to Honolulu, meet their husbands there, and spend the week.
I recall times like when we did our first Jupiter flyby. There is an intense radiation belt around Jupiter, and we were concerned about what would happen to the instruments from being subjected to this intense radiation. We were told by NASA headquarters not to go on to Saturn because they wanted Voyager to be the first spacecraft to go to Saturn. But our project manager and I decided that we were going to make a little mistake and target it so that from the swing by Jupiter, it would automatically go to Saturn. And it did. So we were the first to get to Saturn also.
Now we have a very pleasant and important duty. The induction of new members into the Rutgers Living History Society. We have gained over 100 new members since last year's annual meeting, and several of them are here today and will be inducted in person. So when you hear your name called, please stand up and remain standing. Then we will ask you to all come up, we'll give you your certificate and have a photograph. So, Sean.
All right, Michael Blecker, Stephen Blocker, Deepak Kher, Prakash Parab, Rajesh Mehta, Satish Punj, Shobha Merchandani, and Hemant Patel. Thank you. Now come up here and stand here. Oh, all right. Right here? Oh, down here? Down here, okay, sorry. We are hostages to the light. Thank you. All right. So come this way. Yeah, once we'll all stand together. I'm sorry, I didn't announce it. What's that? Oh, yeah. Good. So watch your tie. Come tighter. Sir, can you present it? Everybody here, big smiles. Thank you. Oh, we have
Okay, at this time we have a special presentation. One of our most devoted community members who's been involved in the oral history program, Dr. Parikh, will you please step forward? First, we're going to show a brief video about Dr. Parikh's background, and then he's going to speak for a few minutes. Dr. Parikh, first the video though.
Publisher, India advocate, philanthropist, and physician, and the sole Indian American recipient of 3 of the most prestigious awards. The Pravasi Bharatiya Samman is an award constituted by the Ministry of Overseas Indian Affairs to honor exemplary NRIs. Dr. Sudhir Parikh.
The Ellis Island Medal of Honor celebrates the richness and diversity of American life. 6 presidents, many senators, congressional representatives, and Nobel Prize winners are among the remarkable group of individuals who have received the Ellis Island Medal of Honor.
Padma Awards are India's highest civilian awards. The glittering ceremony was held at the Rashtrapati Bhavan in the presence of the President of India, Prime Minister, Vice President, and top dignitaries. The award was presented by President of India, Mrs. Pratibha Patil.
Sudhir M. Parikh, Samajik Rally.
Dr. Dr. Sudhir Parikh, internationally acclaimed physician, publisher, India advocate, and philanthropist. Dr. Sudhir Parikh not only preserved Indian culture and traditions on a foreign soil, but also helped strengthen relations between India and the United States with his established alliance on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. Dr. Parikh makes history, attaining the 3 highest honors in the United States and India. He has created a legacy in the community for his multitude of recognitions and lifetime of service.
Good morning, dear friends. Really, I would like to thank Rutgers Living History Society for inviting me here. Also, the director of the society, Mr. Sean Illingworth, and my friend Satrugnaji for inviting me here today in such a great gathering. I'm very lucky that I have really achieved, in my opinion, a great American dream. And I must thank our country, USA, for that opportunity. As you can see, I have multifaceted personality and achievement. I'm a physician by profession. I'm the pulmonologist, allergist, and immunologist, having 22 practices here in tri-state area, 17 in New Jersey and 10 in New York area. And these all practices I acquired one after another since 1980. I'm 78 years old now, and I'm the largest asthma, allergy, pulmonology practice in the East Coast, owned by one person. And really, I'm grateful to USA. Not only medical profession, but also I'm one of the founding member of American Association of the Physicians of Indian Origin, which represents 100,000 physicians, and which serves every 7th physician, you will end up getting the Indian physician who will be your doctor. Also, I'm an incoming president of the Global Physician of Indian Origin, which represents in 1.4 million Indian physicians who trained in India and came out of India to serve the worldwide. And we are the whole, I was one of the founding members of that platform, and we are serving the all young generation physicians throughout the world. Twice a month, we have CME program in medicine to educate them and teach them latest advances in the medicine. But when I turned 60, after having started Global Physician, started American Association of the Physician, after Federation of the Indian Association having parade in the New York City for the last 42 years, when I turned 60, I asked a lot of my guests during that party, senators, congressmen of USA, as well as a lot of big dignitaries from back home like Shri Ravi Shankar, Pramukh Swami, and I asked one question, that I have done this, that I started the professional association, I founded the Vraj Temple in Pennsylvania, I have started India Day Parade 43 years ago. So all this saying, now what? So they say, if you really want to serve, just empower the young generation, particularly the Indian American young generation, who who doesn't know much of India. Of course, they love India, they love Indian food. They are being called themselves Indian descent, but they do not have an emotional attachment or emotional attachment for Mother India. So empower them, and then I decided to my own, without anyone's help, acquired a 24/7 TV channel called ITV Gold. You can all watch on the Sling, ITV Gold. And also I have 4 newspapers, 3 in English and 1 in our language, Gujarati. And this is the only real complete media currently is available in the Indian American. And even I'm a doctor, do not know anything about media. Our ITV Gold TV channel has now 30 million viewers throughout North America. And that shows that if you want to serve the young generation, this is the best way to serve the young generation, because media is the only way you can propagate the education and the news. And more than that, I'm always believing giving back, and all these awards are because of my philanthropic work. In last 15 years, we started one NGO called Life Global in USA, and we built 108 primary schools back home in the rural area of the Gujarat, India. And why in the rural area? Because in rural area there is no facility for sanitary or toilet facilities in the school. So we started building the real school, like this, like here, Rutgers, just like a bricks and mortar school. And by doing that, a lot of poor people or poor families started sending their girls to the school. And that was a great way of attracting young poor girls from the poor family to the education. Also, we provided through another NGO, which I'm a senior advisor, called Akshay Patra, we serve every day 2 million hot meals to these schools and this school and other schools. So that is also another incentive for poor people or poor family to send their children to have at least 1 hot meal a day. And also we empower every year through our Life Global 40,000 women, those who are very poor, they don't have any kind of income. We teach them all the cottage industries, also some small trade like beauty salon and hairdressing and all those things, and they really become self-sufficient. And by making them self-sufficient, they send their kids to for the school for education. And I would not hesitate to say that I'm also one of those kind of middle-class family child who came to America, become a physician, become a publisher, become a philanthropist, and become India advocate. So I'm sure any young generation friends are here in the audience, they should take this lesson that if you are honest, hardworking, you have always have time. Doesn't matter you are physician with the 22 practices, you have a TV channel, you have newspaper, still you can do philanthropy and good work and give back to the community. Thank you. God bless America.
Sean, if you would step up, please. And Bart Klein, please step forward. At this time, I'm welcoming to the stage the class of 1948 member and past president of the Rutgers Living History Society, Bart Klein. Bart will present the Tom Kindry Award this year.
Good morning and welcome. Before I present the Tom Kindry Legacy Award, I want to recognize again one of our original founders, Kurt Peter. Kurt interviewed me way back in 1994. I may have been one of your first, my brother was, no, he already passed away, but I was one of the first that you interviewed. When he was our first director. Thanks, Kurt, for your leadership, friendship, and helping us get started. And Bill, thank you for those kind words for my wife. I appreciate that very much so, as does my son, Bruce. It is most important that we continue to recognize and honor the class, Rutgers class of 1942, my brother's class, and in particular, Tom Kindry, who developed the Rutgers Oral History Archives to tell the stories of their class members of the greatest generation, as Tom Brokaw so aptly wrote. It was their gift to the university for the 50th reunion. The class of 1942 lost 8% of their class in World War II. The class of 1943 lost 10%. I like to bring those figures out just to show you the sacrifices that were made. The class of 1942, with the leadership and the original financial help got also from the classes of the from the 40s and the early 50s, we meet here today. Without their financial support, we would not be here. In 2013, we began the tradition of presenting the Tom Kindry Oral History Service Award to a young staff member, volunteer or student, who most embodied the spirit personified by Tom, the man who planted the seed that grew into the Rutgers Oral History Archives. Until the end of his life, Tom gave tirelessly of himself to see ROHA grow and succeed. The epitome of a loyal son of Rutgers, he spearheaded our fundraising that kept us alive today. For over 2 decades, he worked hard for the Rutgers University. He wrote the book, The Boys from New Jersey, which outlined some of the stories that we hear today from the oral histories. He served as our first president of our society. His influence can be seen in everything we do or come today. Tom was not only a close friend, but my mentor and sounding board during my tenure as president of RLHS. He was and is still very much missed. This year's award of the Tom Kindry Oral History Award is Jack Klein. Jack is a junior majoring in history and minoring in women's and gender studies. Jack began working at ROHA in the fall of 2024 as a part of their public history certification and decided to stay with ROHA as a student after his internship. Sean enthusiastically recommended Jack for the award, as he has shown a great fascination with seeing how many different stories people tell about their lives and learning about their experiences. We hope Jack continues to enjoy working with oral history and is successful in his future endeavors. Jack, please come up here and accept the award from Sean.
We'll have you guys step over here.
Jack,
Okay, Bart. Thank you. Your home is in the office. You're there forever.
With my cane.
Oh, something else. Yep, got it. There you go. All right.
It's now time for a short business meeting for the Living History Society, and I will give you a few minutes of background about where we've been and where we're going. The past 12 months have been transformative for this group. At last year's annual meeting, the membership approved a restructuring of the Society's governance, and we now have 5 fully functioning committees that manage the operations of the Society. Those committees are Constitution and Elections, Events, Fundraising, Membership, and Outreach. I want right now to recognize the chairs and co-chairs of these committees. So when I call your name, please rise. Erica Gorder, Constitutional Elections, and Stuart Friedman. Okay. For Events, Tom Frisiano and John Robinson. Fundraising, Paul Kuznikoff. I think he just stepped out, but he's coming in right now. Paul, there you go. Bart Klein, who you just saw, and myself for membership. And Jeff Rubin for outreach. They have done excellent work in this transition year, and we invite your participation going forward. If you'd like to join a committee, and by the way, this does not take a lot of time, it's really done mostly through Zoom and email and phone. We ask you that you let us know before you leave today, and we'll be happy to sign you up. They're very critical to the work of this organization because the committees really drive what happens. What you see today in this room, this program, was influenced by the ideas of these committees. And I think it's very important that we become a fully functioning participating group. Okay. Also on your table, as was mentioned before, is an event calendar for ROHA and for Rutgers Living History Society detailing locations and activities going forward. We are making a determined effort to raise the profile of the Rutgers Oral History Archives in New Jersey. To that end, the ROHA staff will be doing presentations at major New Jersey history and social studies education conferences in local communities and on the 3 campuses of Rutgers. Our goal is the following: to make sure that ROHA is well known across the university throughout the state, which will clearly enhance understanding of our work and open the door to new projects. And to that end, we are very interested in expanding the focus of the Oral History Archives to embrace new topics and activities. You heard some of those already about working with the Korean American community and other groups. And your suggestions of new projects are welcome. Rutgers Living History Society has also made the decision to re-affiliate with the Rutgers University Alumni Association, and we are awaiting a final decision by the RUAA board on our application. If it's approved, it will expand our access to the alumni networks in the university and do a great deal to raise our profile as well. Now, I want to recognize a man who has been critical in sustaining the work of the Living History Society and Rutgers Oral History Archives. Stuart Friedman, Rutgers College class of 1962, served as president of the RLHS prior to my assumption of the role of chair of the Community Liaison Committee. Stuart has been tireless in his advocacy of the Oral History Society, the Oral History Archives, and the Rutgers Living History Society. His guidance and support during the transition has ensured its success. Stuart, please come forward so Sean can present you with this plaque recognizing your service to the Rutgers Living History Society and the Rutgers Oral History Archives for many years. Before I open the floor for questions and comments, I want to thank the following people. All the personnel from Rutgers Dining Service who set up the beautiful brunch, the members of the Rutgers Glee Club who performed, other support staff, and the Rutgers Bookstore for helping make today's annual meeting a success. And most importantly, our wonderful staff, Sean Illingworth and Assistant Director Jean-Lin Park. Their outstanding work makes us proud to be members of the Living History Society. So are there questions or comments you'd like to share? Nobody's asking, where's lunch? Sorry, we don't have lunch today. Anyway, you always are welcome to contact us through the ROHA website, and we're happy to respond. The other thing I want to mention is that the interview and the film you saw of Daniel James Brown, we're going to prepare a transcript and put it on the internet on the Rutgers Oral History Archives website so you can follow what he said. Because at times I recognize it was a little difficult because his voice was very low. Now, the other thing I'd like to mention is that before you go, Dr. Peeler is here, and he's not going to leave until, if you want to buy his book, he'll sign it. It's outside. If you are unable to buy it right now, if you're interested, or the other books, because you don't have cash, you can go down to the Rutgers bookstore, where if you're an alumnus, you get 10% off. So, I encourage you to do that, and I want to thank you very much for coming today. Godspeed. Good travel home.